Hey, Cypher here, and today I wanted to bring you a discussion on one of the greatest debates amongst scholars. Is it better to have physical or digital books? Well, with all such debates, it comes down to personal opinion, but it's a more nuanced issue than most people like to talk about. I'm a historian, and that means I emphasize research value over all else. And so when it comes to physical versus digital, they both have their virtues. Now, when it comes to reading, I prefer physical books. Just the heft of it, the feel of it, and especially with something like this, which is Thomas Paine's Common Sense and a number of his other works, it's got this like faux leather, so it's also more comfortable to read. Although I love the idea that Common Sense is a Barnes & Noble exclusive. But even with that preference, I end up reading digitally most of the time. And that's because it's cheaper and easier. So first of all, when it comes to reading on a digital format, a lot of people have different ways of doing it. They'll read on their laptops or their phones or even on like a computer monitor or a TV. I prefer a tablet, and specifically an Android tablet that I can put PDFs on with ease and, use it for like media stuff. And this case makes it real easy for me to hold it, or if I am sitting and reading at like, a cafe or a brewery or something like that, I can just flip out the stand and put it there and, eat and read at the same time without having to have another hand free. Simple stuff, right? But on a tablet, you also have to think about the format of the file, because you have several different types of files, such as EPUBs, PDFs, and perhaps something more exotic. Each of those have different problems. So for like a PDF, you have to worry about the exact positioning of the page with each page turn, because you're sliding it like that. But PDFs are closest to the print document, because when you're doing page numbers, you want to keep the same page numbers as the actual print edition. I can be certain that if I say that it's this specific publisher and this specific edition, and that the quote is on X page, then I know exactly where that is. PDFs maintain that, but are a bit of an issue when you're talking about ease of use, because it's literally just scans of the book. Then you have ebooks, and I use Google Books for ebooks, but it keeps the pages in an easily readable format. The problem is that format is not associated with any kind of page numbers, so you have to use this fractional referencing when you're using citations. It's super annoying. Plus, nothing really beats the feel of a book in your hand. The ability to actually turn the page, And leatherbounds just make it better. When it comes to things like scholarly articles, you can basically only get it digitally, and you can go way back. The digitization on scholarly articles goes back to the 19th century for most journals. All of my publications have been digital first. I don't even know if there's a physical copy of my master's thesis anywhere. So availability and reading have two different things. You might like to read with physical books, but it's probably easier to read with digital, especially if you have like a tablet or something like that. So let's talk about searching within a book. So when you're trying to find things quickly in a book, it's typically far easier to find them in a physical book, depending on what you're doing. First and foremost is the index. If you're trying to find information about a given subject on something, it's probably easiest to go to the index. But that means that you need the ability to switch between both the page that you're looking for and the index, which is quite difficult if you're trying to do that with a PDF or an EPUB. They might be hyperlinked, but most of the time they are not. So that means that if you're trying to use an index to find something, physical books are way, way better. That's why you'll often see somebody who's doing a lot of scholarly work have like multiple fingers in the book to be able to go between those different pages. Same thing when it comes to notation. The notation is a lot easier to switch between by being able to just do that, right? Footnotes can come in a wide variety of things, from actual footnotes on the page to endnotes for the chapter or endnotes for the entire book. And a good scholar will be checking those footnotes constantly. That becomes quite difficult on a PDF, since most of the time it's not hyperlinked, and even on an ebook, it's sometimes not hyperlinked, which makes it almost impossible to use to quickly figure out references. Then there's your actual notes in the book. For instance, in this book I have a lot of notes, and what's special about these notes is that I have chapter notes, which means that not only am I underlining important things and saying stuff in the margins through notation, I'm also going to the end of the chapter and summarizing what was in that chapter overall. Now, of course, you can take notes in digital books, but those digital notes are a bit more difficult to get at. Although, with an EPUB, you can save it off to like a Google Drive and have all of those notes and highlights and everything in one place, but then the linking doesn't work all the time. So it's a little bit more cumbersome, even when at most optimal on digital. Of course, finding underlined text in a book is a little bit difficult as well if you know that you underlined it somewhere but don't know where. So you're going to be looking at a whole bunch of different underlines and trying to find it, which maybe you want a specific search function. So a digital search is obviously going to be a lot better than just indexing if you know exactly what you're searching for. But once again, not all books are fully OCR'd, which means that doing a quick search might not yield the results even though it's actually in the book. That happens a lot with digitized 19th century books where it doesn't quite recognize the type or something like that. Plus, there's something extremely satisfying about trying to find a quote and being able to just go, "Oop, there it is." So that digital search function isn't as powerful as a lot of people like to make it out to be. Of course, what's really useful about the digital search function is if you are able to do it library-wide. I keep all of my PDFs on Google Drive, which means that I can just search for a quote throughout my entire library, which is just an awesome functionality. But that brings us to kind of our last overall thing, which is keeping a library and finding stuff within it. So having a wide digital library is way cheaper than having physical books. I have 3 bookcases plus about another bookcase's worth of books strewn about the place. You got Western history over here, random history over here, you got like leather bounds, philosophy, more random history stuff, collections there. For instance, you got Will and Ariel Durant, some encyclopedias, and just some random philosophy over here. Although, here's one part that I have spent a lot of time making it look kind of cool. You got my religious section here, which you got the Catholic Bible, and it's upside down for a reason, and we'll get to that in a second. Same with the Quran. Then you have, this is the Jefferson Bible, see? Used to give that out to all congressmen. Then you have Confucius, Buddhist scriptures, the Bhagavad Gita, the Book of Mormon. This is just another Bible, but New International Version, I believe. Bookending that section is Hitler's Mein Kampf. And then, just to make sure to insulate it from the rest, you got Nietzsche. Then up here, on top, this is a New Testament Bible. Then you have this one, which is actually Mao's Little Red Book, a 1960s copy of it, actually, with the importation mark and everything. And those two go little mini New Testament, then Mao's Little Red Book. And then on top of everything is a book near and dear to my heart, which is, yeah, that goes on top of all of this. And that's why the Quran and Bible are upside down, because it doesn't quite go on top of those. That's the only part of the bookshelf that actually has any kind of like real composition to it. And then moving on from the religious section, pretty much just wherever I can put stuff. There's like the tools and everything, and up here then there is more random history stuff that I've got over the years. Then we got down here more random history, although here is the Bancroft set from H.H. Bancroft's California series. And then down here you got mostly fiction stuff. You can see my microphone that I normally use right there. And then at the bottom here you got some like comic books and more fiction and things that I just couldn't fit otherwise. And then turning around, got some random books here. Got a cat here who's very confused about what I'm doing right now. Some random books over here, and even some random books right over here. Just a whole bunch of random books. And that's probably around 1/10 of the total books I own, because I have way more digital. After all, you can check out from a library digitally, and the digital rights management is malleable. But also, digitization is kind of slow compared to physical publications. Typically, publishers will put out a physical copy before a digital copy, and that digital copy is sometimes kind of difficult to get a hold of. But then you have the problem with having a large library that's difficult to find stuff in. If you keep too much stuff in one folder, you can basically never find it because you'll just be scrolling forever. That's why I keep a fairly robust bibliography, so then I can search that and find out where it is in my library. Of course, finding books on a shelf is a heck of a lot easier, especially if you have it in some sort of organization. Mine's not particularly well organized. At an actual research library, though, it's organized by the Library of Congress standard, which gives you the ability to go find a book that's close to a topic that you're looking for, and then just within its vicinity will be other books that are from that. So perusing like physical books is way better than perusing digital books. If we lose bookstores, we lose a lot of the ability to find books. And furthermore, digital books aren't exactly permanent. The first hard drive came around in 1956. I have books that are double that age on this bookcase, right here. Cloud storage is even more impermanent because it depends on companies like Google to stay in existence and, not lock you out. Whereas I can guarantee these books are going to be right here where I left them. So digital is necessarily impermanent. Then again, I'm still using MP3s that I ripped from a CD in the late 1990s. I owned none of these books back then, since I was a preteen. Back in middle school, my bookcase was filled with Star Wars, Goosebumps, and video games. So not exactly anything I have here. So there's not an easy comparison here. I have a lot more ebooks and e-articles than I do of physical books because of ease of access, but perusing, it's a lot easier to find books on the shelf, and using those books entail a lot of different perspectives, from the feel of the physical thing to notation, using the indices, and being able to underline and find stuff within the book. Nothing can be conclusive on this topic. It all comes down to personal opinion, but there are things that are better and worse about each medium.
Yeah.